Let me tell you something that is the most interesting secret of all time. This is my newest thought that I've not finished. I'm still in the laboratory of my own brain and heart, but I'm gonna try it here in Germany. I've been sleeping on something for about 6 months, and I'm really excited about it because it's super true. I'm just trying to get fully there, so it's just in my soul, because I think you have a sense. I only know how to communicate in improv form. There is no slides. There is no deck. There's only this. And so I often don't talk about things until it's fully ingrained, but I think I'm there. And it's something I want to tell you that is very much in line with what I've just been talking about, which is this concept of who we are, how we roll, why are we affected by what and how, where do we go, and how it's always been the same thing, as if people were unhappy before social media, as if, right? I think everyone here at this conference needs to leave knowing one very important thing. This one very important thing. And that is, you are not tricking anyone. You are not tricking anyone. People continue to live life posturing, sharing photos that they're so happy and crushing it, having dinner and saying, everything's great. My favorite one, buying shit that they can't afford to make it seem like they can afford it, and living basically their entire life as if the bullshit that they're trying to project is actually working. Think about how many times you've gone home after being with 3 or 4 friends and have had a conversation with one other friend about a different friend who was posturing, but you both knew it wasn't true. Think about how the world's currency is actually working. The real obvious thing to me is if we all knew that the only people you ever trick are the only people you don't want to be hanging out with in the first place, I think a lot of things in our world would change. It is time. My friends, why? Why are we trying to impress people so much? Why? For what? We must really work on not allowing outside validation to dictate our lives. You love yourself is real. The problem is people don't love themselves. The reason everyone's trying to do it is they don't, because they've decided, because it was put into their brain, that their worth is based on things that are very surface level. Their appearance, their bank account, and lots of other dumb shit. We have such an opportunity as the world is changing. See, everyone's paying attention right now, and they're focusing on the media landscape changing and the negatives that come along with it. The politics, the nationalism. They focus on that. What they don't realize is in parallel, the platforms also create the opposite. This is the first time since the printing press where we can collectively change the perspective of how the world works. It's true. But the confusion for almost everyone is very similar, which is there is a relationship in the world between being selfish and being selfless. Now, this is where it gets very interesting for me. Too many people feel as if it's one or the other. One of the biggest challenges in the world today is that people think the world is about war. One of the biggest challenges in the world today is that people think the world is about or. It's this or that. It's them or us. It's this or that. When the entire world is always and. People are so obsessed with things to be black and white when the world is purely gray. And so, what I'm very, very fascinated by is everyone here genuinely taking a step back and having a conversation with themselves about them being selfish and them being selfless. Most people's relationship with those two things is an extreme challenge. Some people are inherently selfish and they struggle with it because they think it's bad. Some people are absolutely selfless and they see it as tremendously noble, but when they deliver on it on too big of an extreme, they create subconscious resentment to everyone that they're bringing value to, and then it manifests in vulnerabilities later down the line. If you are able to actually understand selfish and selfless behavior and find balance within both of those for yourself, you can start creating an incredible mental framework to be able to navigate the world. If everybody was able to bleed a little more selfless, if they were definingly selfish, and for the selfless people, if they weren't so noble on paper and could understand that they need to be selfish to themselves to be able to be selfless, we could have a much happier world. Please leave with that today, for sure. Everything I've ever wanted selfishly is happening because of my aggressive selflessness. A funny thing happens. People always talk about, I want to build a brand like you, Gary. I want to build a brand. I'm like, okay. They're like, I want to build a community. I'm like, okay. I'm a very weird dude. And what that means is a lot of times I'll go and audit what that person's doing. When I tell you 99 out of 100 times when somebody's crying about not building a big enough profile, that when I go on their account, that 98% of their content is selfish, as if you are entitled to followers, as if you're entitled to people buying your shit, as if you're entitled to likes. Just by existence, just by posting, you should be getting it. The entitlement in our society is extraordinary. The accountability is equally extraordinary in the negative. The sheer lack of accountability in the human race today is staggering. We are so good at telling everybody and the world what's wrong with everybody else besides ourselves. We love to point fingers. We hate a fucking thumb. I think the lack of accountability is leading to so much unhappiness. Like, life is so much better when you're like, this was my fault.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're in control.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, this was like a wrap up to control. You're in control.
Yeah.
You decide what you consume. You decide what you believe. You decide who you surround yourself with. You decide what you put out. Take on accountability.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to blame right now. The algorithm, they're acting as the algorithms are like hypnosis. And I understand endorphin hits and all that, but like, you can delete the app. You can. Like, where's accountability in this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, we have alcohol, we have tobacco, we have drugs, we have weapons, and we have all sorts of issues, but most people play within moderation. That's on you.
Yeah. And it's a tough truth, right? It's a tough truth. It's a tough truth.
Especially when you're unhappy.
Yeah.
That goes back to why it's important. It's like the chicken and egg. It's like working out. Like, I got into better shape the last 8 years. Nothing comes
less natural to me. Yeah, tell me.
Nothing comes less natural to me.
I can relate to you.
Right?
Man.
But I was like, I just would like to live longer.
Yes.
I would just like to live longer.
Yeah.
And go figure. It's not apple cider gummies. It's not steroids. It's not implants. I've thought about it. I'm like, can I get chest implants? I put in a lot of work. I feel like Seth's good. I feel like I've done more than Seth, but my body type, and I'm like, I probably haven't, but no, it's like eat well, go in the gym, do the right things. And so same for life, whether it's meditation, whether it's exercise, whether it's therapy, whether it's good conversations, whether it's surrounding, back to us not having the serendipity, we've had some meals, we've had some interactions. They're always they're nice.
We need more.
I would like that.
Yeah,
and we'll build on that. I think, I'm spending more time thinking about spending more time with more while doubling down on core. Because I did a really good job in the last 10 years of doubling down on core, but I think being as busy, and I love what I do, I really do want to build out more of a friend network. I want to take more people from lightweight acquaintance to solid acquaintance. I want to take people from acquaintance to friend, from friend to best friend. And so I'm on a journey like everybody else, but I think that I think, believe it or not, and this is going to sound so crazy for so many, the world actually has so much potential for everybody listening to be the best time to be alive. Medicine and technology, and there's so much, but we're caught right now. It's like a hamster wheel. We're in the momentum of focusing on, the bad. Yeah. And there's always bad. Yeah. The Holocaust was bad. Genocide is always going on. Genghis Khan was not a fun time to be a human. Yeah. We are very bad at history. I was a really bad student, but I did well in history. But that starts with you. What are you gonna do about it? Because right now everyone's pointing and feels like it's on someone else. Yeah. It starts with ourselves.
I mean, when you said that and you brought up the Holocaust, I recently read Edith Eger's book, The Gift. She lived through the Holocaust. And she had that mindset in the Holocaust. So she said the only way she got through it is she realized that she wasn't a prisoner, that the only prisoners were the guards, because they were prisoners of their own conscience.
Unbelievable.
That was her mindset.
She's right.
And she's over 90 now or even older. And it's just phenomenal that her, Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, these two phenomenal books, if anyone hasn't read them, they had that in that scenario.
Well, that's the point I always make to everybody. The only thing that works for me is trying to contextualize moments in time. Yeah. And our great-great-great-grandparents had it rough by comparison to the way we have it. And sure, they had some things that were better on simplicity, but we must choose optimism, because what's the alternative? Yeah. Pessimism? Are you just gonna decide? Because once you decide, where are you? Once you decide it's bad, it's actually bad. And so one of the things that makes me very passionate to communicate is practical optimism, or the fact that I believe negativity is much better at marketing than positivity.
Oh, for sure.
I feel a huge sense of responsibility.
What has become, out of all the things you've pursued, because I'm guessing at different stages in your life, and anyone who hasn't heard, I've interviewed Gary twice before, so you can go back and listen to those. You've pursued different things at different times. And every time I meet you, what I love about it is that there's so much growth and acceptance and embracing of this new you. Every time we talk, I feel like I'm talking to a even more self-aware human, which is a really fun feeling when you're checking in with someone in this way. And so I go, what have you found currently to be the most worthy pursuit? What is it that you're pursuing that you've found worthy of pursuit?
It's always been the same thing for me. It's almost as if I'm living two separate lives. The most worthy pursuit is I am wildly gifted at helping other people. And I'm incredibly comfortable of also being okay with feeding myself around my own interests. The most worthwhile pursuit, my friend, I think this is gonna land with you, is the continuous balance beam that I walk on that is called equal parts selfish and equal parts selfless, and refining that skill set. And I think in the 3 times, if I may, off of your analogy, I think the beam is getting thinner and I'm still walking it. You know?
Yeah,
Maybe the first time we met, it was like an Olympic beam or a high school beam. Maybe the second time was, you know, my hope is that as I continue to go, I'll be on a tightrope across Manhattan and walk it easily, because me playing my game of entrepreneurship gives me so much energy that I'm able to deploy it in a positive manner at scale. And I find it fascinating. And so that is what I continue to go after. And my number one advice to millennials, in the way that you asked it, is to not rely on parents. And then number two, to quantify time. We actually have our whole lives backwards. You should be doing the most high risk, high reward work from 20 to 30. The problem is, that's when everybody expects you to grow up. I think, and grow up has transferred in our modern society to safe. I mean, I think that everybody under 30 should be tasting everything to get a better sense of what they're interested in. So I'd like you to call your parents and tell them, if they are, or they may not be, I don't want any more money from you. And then I want you, and then I want you to go on a plane and go to Scotland for no reason. Listen, I get tens of thousands of DMs from kids that are in their 20s and 30s that have deep underlying resentment and depression because their parents are quietly paying for their lives. Which I then tell them, like, don't take the money, jerk. But there's almost nothing worse than a parent subsidizing secretly their child's grown-up life. It will eventually be exposed and talked about, and I can't wait, because a lot of the underlying depression that is confusing people is actually coming from those sources. And it's even scarier when you dig underneath it, because what you start realizing is parents want to posture in front of their friends that little Sally and Johnny are doing well, and that's why they're riding a BMW or have a business, when quietly they're the ones paying for it. During the hardest times or the easiest times, the answer is always to do the best thing you can do with every penny, right? So for me, the advice is, hey, if you're gonna cut, let's remember every business is different. If you're a publicly traded company, you're a big boat. You're not like us, where you're fast. And your tailwinds are what they are.
I'm not fast anymore, I'm slow after listening to this podcast. It's all slow.
And so I think for a Coca-Cola, cutting marketing makes sense, because they're being held accountable to their stock price every 90 days and they need it. Otherwise, it could become a problem, right? For those people, I say, cool, you can cut your marketing budget, but now's the time to fire all these bullshit agencies that do nothing, and you better get to me, whether you have $1 or if you have 50 cents, I'm actually not emotional about that. I'm just emotional about it actually doing the thing you want it to do. For big companies, they waste 90 cents on the dollar with the old advertising ecosystem that I'm in. And that's why we're exploding right now, because of this looming recession. Because now at the scale we're at, everybody knows who we are and what we do. And they know that they were paying somebody else $8 million this year in fee, that we could do it better at $5 million, but they didn't have to do anything about it. Now they do. So that'll be our growth time. But for the entrepreneurs out there, this is the time to really look at what you're spending your money on in your real life. And maybe you don't need to go on 4 vacations, maybe you go to 2. Maybe you need to trade in your Lexus for a Toyota. Maybe you don't have to go out to dinner every day, maybe you go out once a week. Maybe you don't buy Seamless and Uber and Starbucks every day, maybe you do it. You start really cutting so that you don't have to cut your marketing budget, because now is when growth is gonna happen.
I like the fact that you said that, because I think people try to save their way into wealth. You could cut costs as much as possible. Eventually that sponge runs out, and you can't grow a business by cutting expenses. You can only grow a business by bringing in new business.
You can only save your way into comfort.
Correct.
Not into wealth. It's just too hard. Like, it's just too hard. I watched my dad do it. I mean, he did great, but like, defense is defense. There's, back to American football, like prevent defense loses football games. And so, you watch a football game, I'm just gonna be very nerdy for American football fans right now. You watch a football game, your defense does what it does the whole game. They've kept the team to 10 points. They're up 13-10 and the other team gets the ball. They've only given up 10 points in the first 53 minutes of the game, 58 minutes of the game, and now you switch up your defense to not make the big mistake, which gives them all the room to dink and dunk their way all the way to the field and score. That's why teams hate prevent defense. It's why the best defenses last decade don't really go there. And that's how I think about savings. Look, you have to work within your means. And for me, as a human beings that are listening right now, they need to be saving their money on not spending it on dumb shit. Spending on marketing for your business that works is the smartest thing you do. Spending your money personally on $5 coffees 17 times a week is how you spend. If you cut that to 3 and make your own coffee at home, it's how you fucking have the bucks to spend. Like, that's why I always push savings is huge for entrepreneurs, but not like go defense. It's don't spend money on things you don't need when it's harder. One of the great things for me is I put out unlimited content that 98 to 99% of the NFTs were going to zero. So it's nice to be right. It's atrocious to be right when you know how many people are hurt on the other side. But that was greed and not playing with, like, if you lost, like I lost an ungodly amount of money on the things, my current bags, A, I haven't sold yet. You only lose when you sell. 2, every one of those dollars were dollars that I could afford to lose. The people that are most bent out of shape, rightfully so, are the ones who spent money they couldn't afford to lose and didn't heed the call that 99 were going to zero. The problem is they have to be accountable. The content was out there. The reality was out there. What do I think is happening? The same thing that happened when the internet stock market crashed in 2000. Web3 is the biggest technology infrastructure we've seen since the internet, since mobile, since the iPhone. And NFTs are one of the most functional use cases in crypto, blockchain, Web3. And I think over the next decade, they will become omnipresent in our society. And I can't wait to watch it play out.
I'll end with this because you talked about it really quickly when we started. You were worried about saying certain stuff about parenting and you brought up cancel. You may rub some people the wrong way. You know that. You're very vocal about it. What are your thoughts about cancel culture? And are you worried, like you're nothing like him, but like the Andrew Tate of what's going on in the world? Is that a good thing, or for that people are being blocked? Like, what are your thoughts about what's going on? And do you worry about it for yourself?
I definitely don't worry about it for myself. I mean, I put out 50 pieces of content every day for the last, I rub people the wrong way because I put pressure on people's insecurities. I'm not out there tearing human beings down. Think about that.
Yep.
Like, I'm very worried about cancel culture because I think the left, the right, the masculine, the feminine, like I think everyone is spending 99% of their time tearing people down. I spend none of it. I rub people the wrong way because they think I'm too cocky. What they don't realize, it's their own insecurity that's deploying that on me. They're not listening to what I'm saying. They're looking at the way I say things because I'm a fucking very hyper East Coast.
Or you're bringing out something in them that they're unhappy with.
The reason it's inconceivable for me to ever get canceled. I don't have a fucking mean bone in my body. I'm competitive. Scrappy. I'm from the dirt. Don't fucking fuck. I got that in me.
Yeah, but you could strike up the people who are like, this guy swears too much. This shouldn't be on social media. Let's take him down.
By the way, if the world gets to a place where they decide that cursing is an incredibly bad thing for society, I would be canceled. And by the way, that's what gets people scared about platforms having the say in the way they do. I have a lot of empathy for platforms. I have a lot of empathy for people. From my standpoint, I think cancel culture is a real problem because everyone's doing it. I love when my Republican friends say, I hate your Democrat friends, they cancel everyone, and the second a Republican within the Republican Party says anything that doesn't fit for them, they cancel that person. And the fucking left, Democrats, cancel each other, they eat themselves within themselves. The world is tearing people down 24/7, and it's because most people don't know how to be happy within themselves and don't realize what a waste of energy it is to judge and deploy that energy on other people. We should hold people accountable. But what's happened is it's gotten so extreme that's why you have a counter to cancel, because people are trying to cancel people for the most mundane. Somebody tried to cancel somebody in one of my companies because somebody was walking by and nicely said to somebody, hey guys, and it was 2 women, and they desperately wanted that person fired because they weren't guys. But that's a saying. That's like a saying. There was no ill intent. When we start taking intent out of the equation and we're in gotcha land, it's fucking over. And we're in gotcha land right now in America. And this is what happens. When you get so ridiculous that you're just trying to get everyone, it counters. And I'm very concerned because I think the bad guys and gals are gonna get away with more bad. Because now it's going to go through a cycle where you can't cancel anything for anything about anything.
Yeah.
This is just the way the fucking world works. I don't worry about all that nonsense on every side. Politics, canceling, feminism, masculine. I don't think about any of that shit. I am fucking waking up every day, trying to do good and nice, and just fucking going forward, and whatever communication, infrastructure, community, reality that comes of it, that's what it's gonna be, and that's the way it's gonna be. What's so fun for me is this is 100%. I will not live the rest of my life in a bullish market and growth. So like recalling, I can't wait to air this content the day the whole fucking world melts. And it's gonna be like, I told you so, and I hope you did something about it. Because now it gets really weird.
I heard you make that comment about student loan debt. Oh God.
I'm gonna be so right about that.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna be so historically right about that. They're lending money to kids in huge debt. There's nothing else to say. There's nothing else to say. The banks are doing it again. Yeah. This time it's not bullshit mortgage, things you guys understand better. I understand packaging up horse shit and not having a true recognition, a true system. They're like, you guys probably in the younger, you guys know, you have friends or acquaintances who are $180,000 in debt on 9% interest, are making $47,000 a year and are buying expensive shit or have a new apartment.
It's true. It's a lot of loan. It's true.
It's going to be so bad. Right now, we're in such a great era for creators because we're living through the TikTokification of all social media. AKA, for a decade, you had to build a lot of followers to get anything seen. Now, your first piece of content be seen by 1 million people. That's profound. So now we're in a whole different world where if you do a podcast, the clips get posted on TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels, which I think is gonna start following for a bigger virality kind of gap. What I mean gap is instead of all your Reels getting somewhat the same amount of views, now you'll start seeing some things go viral, but the views you're getting are declining because they have to have those views for the virality. If in that copy, your entire Instagram Reels profile is listen to the podcast and the podcast is the default URL, and in the post-production of that Reels, there's a logo saying listen to the podcast, you're using the content that you got from the podcast to drive to subscriptions for the podcast, and it becomes a viral loop.
All right, here's a question. I'll let you probably not when you get asked a lot. So let's say you had some actual marketing dollars to put behind this. Where would you put them?
I would put them in the place where the person wants the audience. So for you, there's very two clear things on what I know so far. The debate would be, do you run TikTok ads because they're very underpriced?
Yeah.
For general awareness, or do you run LinkedIn ads for very targeted business purposes? And the answer is probably both.
And so you do what about I don't know if people do this, what about pay X dollars to get someone crazy on my podcast? Is that,
I'm sure people do it.
Yeah.
I haven't really looked under the hood. I'll say something really funny. You would be flabbergasted how many people say yes to the most random podcast that have no listeners. And you have actually something to bring to the table because when they Google you, they're like, whoa. And if you think about a celebrity, a person, the finance, the private, these are most of the people that have become successful didn't get there by accident, right? So a Ryan Reynolds team actually seeing that email from you, be on this podcast, to me is you'd be surprised how much that might be in play, given that, the Jin, he's just so entrepreneurial, he just might think it's a good use of his time.
Yeah.
As long as you have the humility to deal with a lot of no's, and even just hearing mowing lawn and blue collar, that tends to tell me that you probably do, then you're cruising in a game of just asking 35 people, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You reach out to the 55 people that you most want, none of them reply. You do it one more time, one of them replies, now they become the name that you email the next 54 back and be like, look, we had Malcolm Gladwell on the show, you know what I mean? And so, I feel paying a guest is probably something that's going on a lot, something I'm completely unaware to giving any advice on, because I don't know.
No, I'm unaware.
But it's probably worth a debate, comma, I just have a funny feeling, if you're talking business world, a lot of people will say yes, even the biggest CEOs in the world. Pop culture, fame world, because of what you do for a living, I still think you get 5% return on reach out, and that will be enough to get the flywheel going. You could do a ton in 60-second TikTok videos. It's called, you can pique interest for them to click the URL in your profile to listen to the 1 hour podcast. Mm-hmm. Almost all my social content is just a gateway to the longer form content and vice versa. Mm-hmm. They work together. So to me, the 60-second content is the marketing. Mm-hmm. It is the amuse-bouche, it is the setting up to the longer form. I think a lot of people who have serious content have overly disrespected social because they understood that they couldn't fit it all into that package. Well, no business can fit all of its information into any marketing. The marketing is there for you to go deeper. With the lack of friction in the internet world, it's there for you.
And you think the long form is a podcast?
I think the long form is a very personal self-awareness framework of how one communicates best. Malcolm Gladwell communicates better in the written word than he does in audio and video. For me, I'm incapable of communicating in the written word. My employees know when I send a company-wide email, they're like, our CEO can't spell. Like, why are we here? And so, and so I think, look, for me, it is very clear that video is the most powerful medium, and that's been proven. But Howard Stern did just fine on radio, and Rush Limbaugh and many others built their brand in that of sports radio, Mike and the Mad Dog. And then there's the written word, and Harry Potter's profound, and Malcolm Gladwell's profound, and Michael Lewis. And so I think that's a game of one's capability. And then I always tell people also focus on what you like to do. You might be a better writer, but you actually enjoy making videos. You're probably better off doing, well, the answer is always both, but you're better off probably end of the day, if you can only pick one, to do video, because if you like it, you'll do it.
And then how do you, you've got a number, I'm in a similar situation with you. I have a lot of interests that are actually not creating
scattered
content. Yeah, like I'm building a private equity firm.
Yep.
I'm teaching a class, which takes a tremendous amount of time. And then how do you think about those priorities versus the content that you're creating? And I
believe every human being has an hour that they don't think they have.
So is that really what it takes, an hour, you think?
Yeah, it all depends on the info. Luckily, given that you're in the private equity business, you may have the resources to, for a lot of people watching, they may not have the financial resources to make it an hour. When I used to do all the editing and all the, it didn't take, by the way, all my editing was record, stop, post. I became an improv, no editing, no lighting, no audio maker with Wine Library TV because I didn't have the capabilities or the money to hire someone to do it. Right. I did that for 7 years. People forget that part. They only see the end. They don't see that journey, which is, so for you, which is why it's so great to host a show, because you're in the business of getting the content and bouncing off of it out of the person that's with you. So it's not like teaching a class where there's prep.
What do you mean by that? What
I mean by that is if you're interviewing a private equity executive or schooling executive or some other interests you have, surfing, wine, baseball, whatever it is, you're just Scott Boras shows up and you're like, Scott, how'd you start your career? Right. As long as you have the capability to react to the words that they're answering, you have a very meaningful podcast.
Right.
Obviously, I'm very off the charts improv, clearly, which is why a lot of them have top 100 podcasts. There are people who do real prep work to ask the best question. When I did How You Built This, I was like, Jesus Christ, he knows more about me than I know about me. So clearly there are different versions, but in the spirit of being busy, if you're able to get interesting people and you feel comfortable in having conversations, and I already know that about you in the limited interactions we have, I think you're structured to not have to put in a lot of prep time, just the 7 to 10 basic questions, if you're able to bounce off of what they say, should lead to a very interesting podcast.
25-year-olds to 35-year-olds to run a business is like one of the biggest groups in the world right now. Most people out there think of it actually as VC, Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like kids that raise capital. I would argue that that's the smallest sector. The far bigger sector is family business takeover, and then you have another small sector similar to VC backed, which I think is private equity DNA, where the person goes into it knowing that they want a couple of chapters, maybe 1, 2, or 3 bites at the apple of being operators at some point in their lives. And then that content over-indexes for former operators in their 50s and 60s who've joined private equity with a 50% thinking that I might have to do one more at bat and go take over and run something when the operator can't do it after we make the investment. And those themes for that 60-year-old may not be the same for that 27-year-old, but there's probably a 50% crossover of content which creates audience and interest in the subject matter.
Yeah, I love that.
Like for example, it's back to playing chess or counterpunching or mixed martial arts. It's really chess. I was creating content. I didn't know that I was gonna go down parenting themes. It was a reaction to who was resonating with my content, which was parents trying to understand why their kids were resonating with my content, initially thinking they didn't like me because of the cursing or the energy, and then finding themselves overvaluing me. I mean, my inbox now has, in the last 7 years, has gone from parents being mad at me and saying, stop cursing, stop telling my kid not to go to college, to in the last 24 months, you're the only person my kid's listening to. You're actually pushing the agenda I want them to. Please keep doing it. Don't ever stop.
Nice.
And I think for every content.
Well, your content's changed a little bit too.
Well, it evolved. It changed because I was listening to the emails. I was like, wait a minute, and some of it was doubling down. When the parents were pushing, I'm like, you're pushing for the wrong thing. It's very real, and you'll feel this as you start to grow. Direct message number 1. Hey, Gary, like, you're a real menace. Like, stop doing this. You're like telling my kid not to go to college. Who the fuck do you think you are? Next DM. Hey, Gary, I'm in deep depression. I'm now on a lot of medication and starting to use alcohol and drugs because my parents are making me go to Yale and I want to be an artist. You start reading that over and over and over again, you become more invigorated to say, fuck you. You want to help these kids. Because then and by the way, I just painted you I didn't paint you the full diamond. Then the 9th message is, Gary, I have a problem. My kid is in big trouble, they hate me, and I think some of the stuff you're talking about might be why. I overpushed them to be an engineer, now they won't speak to me. Like, what do I do? So all of a sudden you're sitting in this place where you have gift of gab or communication skills. And by the way, I felt this 10 years ago when my audience was so small, nobody knew who the fuck I was. It doesn't take much to feel compelled when you're reading this stuff.
Yeah.
Content creation and all of you are in it, so a lot of this stuff will make sense. But I think the first thing that I think about always is self-awareness. I think the biggest issue for content creators is them being inspired by someone else and then them subconsciously, not even consciously, subconsciously trying to be like that person, which is an incredibly difficult task because every one of us in this room, me included, have strengths and weaknesses in their ability to create content. So I think there's a couple things to think about. One, your own self-awareness of what you're good at. For example, I'll give you one. I think the concept of writing content is like forgotten in a visual world, yet I can tell you that some of my written content on LinkedIn is dramatically more profound and does well than my clips on TikTok or Instagram. And there may be people in this room whose strongest method of communication is actually in written form, yet the push towards short form video or images make them work on that when they're deviating from a strength. So I think first and foremost, what I think about is a couple things. And they're all in the form of transparency and self-awareness. One, what are you best at communicating? Is it audio, video, written form? Two, the thing that has kept me in a very strong position from the earliest wine videos I made to what I'm gonna do tomorrow is I have never talked about something I don't know, ever. I think when you're a content creator, you feel pressure to output. And when you feel pressure to output, you can get very caught to start talking or creating around something you may not fully understand. A lot of people come and go, and there's some very clear truths to having success. And I think it's one, understanding your format while still trying to challenge yourself. You may be better at writing. It's still good to try to be better at video, but it's not crippling yourself and thinking you can only be successful if you do video. 2, do not deviate from your knowledge. Now, that doesn't mean going, like, look at me, I'm talking about NFTs. I spent 100 hours of research before I made my first video, but putting in the work to be able to talk about something new is very important. The quickest way I've seen people lose is by being too quick to talk about things they don't know. Very important. Number 3, a very big thing for everybody to keep in mind here, do not fall in love with the platform that got you there. A very big thing that I've seen consistently in the last 15 years is Twitter was your strong platform, here came Instagram, and you didn't want Instagram to become big because you didn't want to start over and build up your following count. So many, and this is gonna make sense for all of you, so many leaders on Instagram made a huge mistake by not adopting TikTok, right? They didn't want to because they had all their followers. Constant mistake, being too romantic about platform and not adjusting to where the attention is actually going. People overthink positioning. Like, I talk a lot lately about don't be an expert, be an enthusiast. Everyone's losing in content right now because they're like, I'm an expert, and then we are like, you're not, and it's over before you start.
That's right.
Right? I've never said I was an expert, and I actually am in the shit that I talk about. I did 15 years of wine before I talked. I did 30 years of business before I talked, and never say the word expert. You know why? Because I'm not insecure about it, I am it. Everybody else.
So practitioner would be the word that I would
correct,
allow, right?
right?
Well, I'm a practitioner.
So what I think you need to do is not worry about positioning. When, you know, back to, you're right, too many people worry about the positioning because they think that's the thing that gets it done. It's not. It's the truth that gets things done. Whether you're an expert or enthusiast or influence, you know, people are like, I'm not an influencer. I'm like, cool. Like, people call me everything. I think I'm a fucking motivational speaker? I do not think I'm a motivational speaker. Do I think many people position me? Sure. All of it's irrelevant. It's all about what the actual truth is. You are actually not just a tenant. You are a beacon of the community. You're all these things. And when you start talking, then things happen. I was on 2 meetings. I'll give you an example. I was on 2 meetings today, both which were clients that don't know me. They know my teams. I was in 2 of them today, which is not that often, by the way, that this happens. We're getting bigger and bigger and bigger where I'm not the only one selling clients in, and I rarely service clients. So I was in 2 meetings, ironically today, it made me think of it. Do you know what my takeaway was from both meetings? Oh shit, Gary really knows what the fuck he's talking about. He's not just the mascot of this company. That wasn't me positioning. I didn't start the meeting with like, I'm the CEO. Like, I just talked for 30 minutes or went back and forth. Get a seat at the table with no positioning. I'm JD.
That's what it is.
Right,
That's
I'm
right,
JD,
yeah.
motherfucker. That's who I am. But when you
that
talk.
works for me, actually.
I know it does.
I just also often
but you
believe
gotta
that
remember.
We'll also ask you to leave.
That's fine too, but you gotta remember, for all of you and for everybody who's watching at home, if they were able to watch this, it doesn't matter what your title says. It matters what you do. When you say something, do you back it up? And so don't overstress how you're positioned, just talk that talk. Here's why it works. If they're smart, they'll know. I win with smart winners, and I lose with dopey losers. If somebody's confused about my merits after I'm done talking about a subject, that's not on me, that's on them. And honestly, I use it as a filter for me. And by the way, sometimes it doesn't land for me, and I walk out and be like, because I never talk about anything other than exactly what I know, so if it doesn't land, there's some political reasons they don't want to hire us or work with me or like
That's
what
right.
I said. There's some other things going on. That's not my worry. I'm not in the business of convincing. I just move on.
That's great. That's very encouraging. That's actually true to my actual way, but I just feel like I've been beating on these doors so long. I'm like, it's
I get
frustrating,
it.
right?
Listen,
And-
I continue to be talked about as the wine guy, an influencer, a motivational speaker, and I'm building some of the biggest businesses. Like, I'm building the most successful advertising agency in the world. Nobody even knows I have a job. Everyone's like, one of the top 10 searches is, what does Garyvee actually do? Like, you know, so like, fuck that noise. Like, people are gonna judge, you know, like, it's irrelevant what people think before you start talking. It's important what people think after you're done talking your truth. Sometimes it's not gonna land because they don't care what you have to say. They have a financial incentive, a political incentive. They've already decided who they want to play your role, and that's just life.
Yeah. Awesome.
I mean,
That's really helpful.
we lost a
It's
recent,
encouraging.
I'll give you a good one. We lost a recent pitch. It was fire. I was so proud of my team. And like, I was baffled by it for a few minutes. And then like somebody walked by and was like, oh, the agency they picked is the son-in-law of one of the partners. I'm like, oh.
They just had to have the two other bids or whatever.
Yeah, I'm like, I wish we knew that before we put in that work, but cool,
Right.
like Mazel Tov. Like that's, of course, like that doesn't bother me at all. That's life. I live in this studio apartment with 8 family members. I watched my family live the American dream through hard work. I worked 15 hours a day when I was 14. Like literally my dad should go to jail for child labor. Like, and what gets me going in a setting like this is it's the reverse of the joke I made of like, I don't care about your business. I do care. I want it for you because it's there. Like it's so much, you know, like a lot of people get complacent. They're like, you know, they're like, Gary, I don't want to put in the work for this. Like, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. I mean, live your life, but a lot of people want to grow. How many people here want their business to grow? Raise your hand. You know, I mean, it's real. Like the thing I made earlier of like, you came here, what the hell, if you don't want it to grow, you wouldn't be here. So to me, don't do shit to check the box. Don't make yourself feel good because you came to a fucking conference in DC. Go and do something about it. And to me, this is so sitting there, and if you're doing 800,000 a year in revenue in service local business, I know for fact, if you give me 100 hours of your time and effort on this thing, that becomes 1.6. And that, I lived what a business, I took my family business from a $3 million to a $65 million business in 8 years. I know what that does for a family. I bought my car at a garage sale. My brother, who's 11 years younger, my parents bought him a Lexus. I'm pissed. But I know what it does to a family. And so like, I'm desperate because it's literally right there. It's literally right there. Make content on LinkedIn. Make content that's not sales pitch, make it informational, post every day. How do I post every day, Gary? Start a fucking podcast. Interview people. You don't even have to prep. Hey John, how'd you start your bagel store? Do it.